Hi, welcome to Conflict Story, where we bring you the best and most fascinating stories just for you. Let's dive right into one of those stories. It begins like this.
The rotor wash hit like a sandstorm, stinging my face and rattling the tin on my old hanger. A neon green laser slashed up through the haze from a lifted Jeep stamped Neighborhood Patrol, catching the pilot's windshield dead on. Two men in black and white vests that said Homeowner Association Security unspooled yellow tape across my ranch road like they owned the dirt under my boots. "Down on the ground!" the thick one yelled, aiming a tactical-looking airsoft carbine like it was gospel. I pointed past them, to the red cross on the helicopter's belly, and the neighbor hunched on my tailgate going gray around the lips. "Medical evac! He's crashing!" I shouted. "You don't have authority out here." The skinny one smirked, adjusted his chest cam, and barked into a handheld. "Helipad unauthorized, repeat unauthorized." The pilot wobbled, banked hard, and pulled away, the rotors fading into a hurtful emptiness that felt like a door slamming in a burning building. Let me back up. Name's Ethan, 56. I carry my years like a turnout coat I can't take off. 30 years in fire service taught me two things. Smoke goes where it wants, and so do people when they're scared. My ranch sits at the ragged edge of a master-planned community the Homeowner Association calls the Preserve, which is funny because they tried to preserve me out of existence when I refused their landscaping templates. We share the road maintenance. That's the only line tying us together. Most days I keep to my horses, my tools, and the hangar I built back when I still thought silence could heal. The day my wife didn't come home from a night shift, the house learned my footsteps, and my coffee learned to taste like metal. Funny thing is, I never thought I'd need my old instincts again, until I heard the chopper call my name on approach, requesting my field because the neighbor's pasture was cut by fence lines and the club's parking lot was ringed with lights like a trap. Here's what happened. The Homeowner Association formed a neighborhood patrol a month back. Volunteer weekend warriors with Amazon radios and a thirst for feeling important. Their queen bee is Karen, polished blonde, manicured to the cuticle, voice like a ruler cracking on a school desk. "Safety," she says, like it's a brand she sells. She'd sent a notice about nuisance air traffic after a sightseeing helicopter buzzed the lake. This wasn't sightseeing. This was a man whose heart was ticking like a weak battery, and a pilot who trusted the flat, moan, obstacle-free rectangle I'd kept for emergency landings since my fire days. The patrol showed up before I could mark the wind. The fat one strutted in a duty belt with zip ties swinging. The skinny one wore mirrored sunglasses that reflected me back at half my size. They weren't cops. They were theater. "Move your truck," I said, voice low, because yelling never put out a fire. "We've got a LZ and a pilot who needs a clean set down." The thick one puffed. "We have new rules," he said, unfolding a sheet with a clip art seal and air noise compliance addendum in bold. "No landings without committee approval." I took one look. Inkjet. Off-center seal. No statute cited. "That's not law," I said. "It's not even straight." He thrust it at my chest. "On the ground," he repeated, and when I didn't move, the skinny one reached to his vest and clicked something. The helicopter's radio squawked, then went dead silent. Static chopped in half. My stomach dropped. They had a handheld signal jammer, one of those shady boxes that bulldoze a slice of airwaves. Not legal, not moral. Effective, though. A shadow fell across my shoulder. "You're going to stand there or help?" Lena said. She's a neighbor, too. Just not the kind the Homeowner Association likes. Mexican-American, ER nurse, ponytail tight, shoes quick. We'd spent a year growing a cold fence between our properties after a fight about a gate line. She was the one who called me when the 911 operator pinged her for the medevac. "Wind's quartering," she said, already scooping a garden hose like a lasso. "We mark it, or he's blind." I tore away from the tape, grabbed my old kit, orange smoke can, flashlight wands, a tattered windsock. "Hey!" the skinny one snapped, swinging the airsoft muzzle. "You're interfering." His voice had the crackle of someone who loves recording themselves being important. We hustled to the fence line. I jammed the windsock pole into packed earth, pain shooting like lightning from my shoulder down my arm. The same shoulder that went out the day I carried a kid out of a 2-story and didn't make it back up for the mom. I can still smell the cherry shampoo when I close my eyes. Lena lit the smoke with a Bic, and orange curled into the sky like a road drawn with a neon crayon. The Jeep revved. The fat one gunned side by side and came at us, fishtailing gravel. The tires clipped the smoke can, flipping it into the ditch where it hissed and died. I lunged, and my boot caught a root. I went down hard, shoulder-wrenching, gravel biting through my jeans. The helicopter circled again, then drifted unsure, a dragonfly above a glassy pond that someone kept tapping. "Enough," said a voice behind us. And here came Karen, hair in a helmet bob, lips glossed, sunglasses perched like she was about to cut a ribbon. She had a tiny megaphone the color of a rose gold phone case. "Residents," she announced, pointing it at me like a weapon. "This man is creating a hazardous situation on private property. Please do not engage." Phones lifted like a field of sunflowers turning toward an ugly sun. She liked the camera. I saw it in the angle of her chin. "Karen," I said, sitting on the gravel because standing made the pain white out my edges. "You're delaying a medical helicopter." "Air ambulances," she smiled, "must follow community guidelines. We have children napping." Somewhere behind her, my friend Derek, boat buddy, fisherman, laughed too big for his thin frame, hovered at the edge. He wore a committee badge I hadn't seen before. "I'll talk to her," he mouthed earlier at the gate. I believed him. That was my first mistake. "Let me back up," I told Lena under the megaphone whine, because she didn't know this part. Month ago, I got a call at midnight from a pilot I knew from my fire days. "You're still keeping that strip mode?" he'd asked. "Always," I said. "Good," he said. "Your field's clean. The club parking lot's a hazard." Now, as I watched Karen smile, I understood the hazard wasn't concrete and light poles. It was people who treated authority like a hobby. The skinny one, name tag said Chad, which fit like a glove, clicked his little box again, and I felt the hair on my arms rise and sink with that dead slice of air. "He's losing comms," Lena hissed. "We need a visual language he can't jam." What I discovered next wasn't an accident, I said later, but in that moment it hit me like a barn door in a gust. They didn't just want quiet, they wanted to hide something. The club by the lake had new blackout drapes and a generator, even though the grid was fine. I caught a whiff of sulfur once on a jog past the hedge. Fireworks, big ones. Illegal in quantity and stored like someone thought sparks were a myth. If a helicopter's thermal camera caught that stash, their little New Year empire would look bad. Karen's eyes slid toward the club every time the helicopter made a pass, like a cat pretending it doesn't notice the bird. We tried again. I cut an old tarp into strips, tied them to the fence to show wind direction. Lena sprinted to the open pasture gate and stacked feed sacks to mark the touchdown. The fat one plowed the side-by-side straight through them, laughing. My body remembered every midnight two-story I'd ever climbed. Adrenaline, the narrowness at the edges of vision, the uselessness of anger. I stood anyway, dizzy, blood in my palm making the gravel look like pepper in a stew. "You done?" Karen said into the megaphone, the feedback squeal drilling my teeth. Behind her, Derek finally stepped forward, cap low on his eyes. "Ethan," he said, palms out, "let me talk to her." He turned, leaning close to Karen like a supplicant. She nodded. For a second, the weight in my chest shifted, just enough to feel like hope. Then Derek slipped a keys ring from his pocket and passed it to the skinny one. The keys were brass, worn. I knew that ring. It opened the club's lower storage. My mouth went dry. He wasn't interceding. He was enabling. A small betrayal can feel like a big knife when it's in a soft spot. You ever have a crowd look at you like you're the problem while a problem chews on someone's oxygen? A phone lens feels like a little cold eye, and a dozen of them add up to a winter. Karen lifted the megaphone again. "Resident," she said, "you are trespassing on community space." "This is my ranch road," I said. And she smiled a sugar smile and said, "Shared easement," like that wiped my name off the dirt. I felt the old guilt rise, the kind that smells like hot plastic and nights you wish you could change. I sat back down. "I'm too old for this," I told Lena, and for a heartbeat I meant it. The helicopter banked away again, a red cross shrinking to a dot, and the man on my tailgate breathed like a fish pulled onto the deck, mouth opening and closing around nothing. Losing matters. Sometimes it's honest. The funny thing about braking is sometimes it fixes something crooked inside you. I staggered to my hangar, shoulders screaming, vision edged with stars, and pulled down a metal box the color of an old bruise. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a handheld scanner from my engine days and a faded rescue flag my wife once teased me for keeping. "You and your relics," she'd said, hanging her helmet on the hook, hair damp, eyes alive. I pressed my cheek to the cracked visor of that helmet, and the plastic was cold and smelled like smoke, and the shampoo I can still name if I try. In the mirror, I saw a man who'd been sitting on the bench too long. "If I burn," I whispered, "it's for something." Here's what happened next. I climbed the ladder to the hangar roof, every rung arguing with my shoulder, and flipped the cover on an old siren that hadn't howled since the county retired it. It wasn't on the community grid. It was tied to my own diesel and stubbornness. I cranked it until my knuckles went white and threw the switch. The sound bloomed over the valley like an iron flower, deep and round, the tone we used to reserve for drop everything. The patrol flinched. Karen's megaphone squealed and died. Phones wavered. Noise is a language too. I hoisted the rescue flag on the long aluminum pole, the red X on white cutting through the haze, an old-school visual the pilot would know if he'd ever trained with folks like me. Down below, Lena shielded her eyes and gave me a look that was half curse, half prayer. The man on my tailgate groaned, which is a kind of timer. "But here's what she didn't know," I said, flipping the scanner on and sweeping frequencies like a hound on a scent. I caught their channel, unsecured because amateurs love easy, and let the chatter pour into my ear. "Chad, hold the jammer, the bird's circling," Derek's voice said, tight with the wrong kind of adrenaline. "Karen says, keep it dark till the club clears." The words landed in me like nails. I thumbed the recorder on the side of the scanner, an ancient red LED winking to life. I wasn't thinking about press or court. I was thinking about pressure points. I could snap and make it worse, or I could push where it hurts until something gave. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. It rang once and picked up on a voice that carried gravel and grace. "Ethan," he said, like I'd just come off shift. My old chief, now coordinating the volunteer search and rescue outfit that still trains with the sheriff when nobody's watching. "Chief," I said, breath shallow with pain and purpose. "Got a bird trying to set down, a community patrol blocking, and a club that might have a fireworks closet that would make your eyebrows sweat." "You calling to vent or to ask?" he asked, because he knew me. "To ask for a drill," I said. "Right now. Surprise. Your call, your jurisdiction, not mine." Silence, then a chuckle that meant yes in our language. "You stubborn mule," he said. "Keep your flag up." Out in the field, Karen tried to reclaim the stage. "Residents," she began, but the siren drowned her like a wave. The Jeep backed into the club driveway. The skinny one sprinted with Derek's keys jangling, glanced over his shoulder at my flag like it had flipped him off. Lena brushed dust off her knees and said, "If they jam the radio, they can't jam a pilot's eyes." "No," I said, tasting blood, grit crunching like sugar. "But they can jam his nerve if they make it look like chaos." I swallowed the word chaos like a pill and stood anyway. What I didn't expect was the way the air changed when the first rescue trucks rolled, white and red, not at my call, but riding the chief's unscheduled drill directive, a convoy of competence that parked on the club's pretty pavers like they paid the HOA dues themselves. Volunteers poured out, half of them retirees with the posture of men and women who'd already seen the worst day and come back for seconds. The sheriff's unit slid in behind them, lights low, faces unreadable. Karen's smile cracked. "This is private," she said to a woman with a radio vest marked with a county logo I recognized. The woman looked at my flag, at the reeling man on my truck, at the hole in the hedge where someone had dragged a crate recently. "Ma'am," she said, professional polite, "we're conducting a landing zone exercise." The pilot's shadow swung, the siren sang, and somewhere, a fuse nobody wanted lit waited in the dark. Have you ever watched a lie run out of breath? It staggers, it leans, then it grabs for a friend. Karen grabbed for hers, Derek, and he gave her what she wanted. Keys, a whisper, a pale face that said he'd stepped too far and didn't know how to step back. He glanced at me. I lifted the scanner so he could see the little red light recording. I didn't threaten. I just let him imagine the sound of his own words on someone else's radio. He broke eye contact first. The first fire engine popped a compartment, and a coil of hose snaked toward the club like a warning. The air carried a dry, sugary tang now, unmistakable to anyone who's ever stood near a box of rockets big enough to scrape the sky. The volunteer captain raised an eyebrow at the generator by the hedge. "That run hot lately?" he asked nobody and everybody. Karen's voice thinned. "This is harassment," she said. "We have children." "So do we," the captain said, nodding at my tailgate, where a grandfather could be losing a father. The helicopter dropped lower, the wash flattening grass into a green mirror. I lifted the flag with my bad arm, and my shoulder sang a sharp, bright note that had me swallow a groan. "Hold," I told myself. "Just hold." The Jeep's driver gunned it toward the field, wheels chewing divots. The skinny one, now red-faced, fumbled the jammer box, smacked it, and the radio hissed alive on the wrong frequency, spilling their internal bark into the sheriff's ear. The sheriff's hand drifted to his belt, not threatening, just anchoring himself to authority real enough to do harm. A volunteer cracked open a side door of the club, and a sparkle of light kissed the air like a warning star. Fireworks, stacked like a dragon's hoard, cozy with extension cords. The generator coughed. The helicopter's skids flashed. Lena grabbed my wrist hard enough to bruise. "Don't you let go," she said, a command more than a plea. "Not again." In her eyes I saw a mirror of my own worst night. The past pressed its thumb into my throat. What would you do? I had two choices: yank the plug on everything and pray we didn't light the sky, or trust that noise, flag, and a drill could stitch a landing back together under the weight of disorder. I chose the second because I've learned that control isn't a thing you take. It's a thing you make in other people's heads. I held the flag high, siren screaming, shoulder burning like a coal. The pilot lined up. The wind shifted, a friendly shoulder at our backs. And then, from inside the club, a pop sounded like a cork, followed by a sizzle and a breathless rising hiss that meant something had met, something it shouldn't. The volunteer captain's radio crackled. "Possible ignition in storage," someone said from the doorway. Karen turned as if she could hold the sound in by will. The skinny one dropped the jammer. The sheriff lifted his hand. The helicopter hung, undecided, a hawk above a mouse hole. My siren wailed into a high plateau. In that stretched-thin second, I understood the next minute could break everything: my field, my hangar, my nerve, or make it. I took one step forward, flag whipping, and shouted into the wind, "Set it down! I've got you!" The pilot's nose dipped. The generator coughed again, louder, and a finger of smoke curled out from under the club eave like a secret finally spoken. The smoke came out thin at first, a gray ribbon slipping under the eaves of the club like it was sneaking a cigarette. Then the ribbon thickened and unrolled along the soffit, and I smelled the sweet, powdery bite you never forget once you've seen a sky go wrong on the 4th of July. The volunteer captain snapped, "Pull a line, cool the wall, keep the door," and the world pivoted from posturing to work. Karen darted toward the doorway as if she could slam it shut on reality. "Stay back," the captain said, cutting across her path with a calm that had steel ribs. She lifted her megaphone like a charm against consequence. "This is a private—" The siren swallowed the rest, and the helicopter drifted closer, skating the edge of committing. My shoulder trembled around the flagpole, hot wire under skin, but I wasn't dropping it. Not after everything I'd already dropped and lost. "Ethan!" Derek's voice came soft at my side, the soft of someone who knows he's already on the wrong side of the street. He glanced at the scanner in my fist, saw the red record light, and swallowed his words like bad whiskey. "Keys," I said, not asking. He hesitated, then pressed the brass ring into my bloody palm. "I'll open the gate," he offered like a penance. "No," I said. "You'll turn that siren crank when I tell you. You'll make this loud." He flinched, eyes flicking to Karen's back. She'll what?" I said. "Tell the truth that's already breathing smoke?" He looked toward the club, where a volunteer had a pike pole on the eave, tapping, listening to the crackle patter like dry leaves. He nodded once, jaw clenched, and headed for my siren stand like a man walking onto a stage in the wrong play. The helicopter pilot, bless whatever grit put him in that seat, nosed down again, reading the flag and the wind and the chaos with a professional eye. But the rotor wash started to flirt with the smoke, drawing it into eddies that could blind him. Lena stepped into the wind cone like she had a shield I couldn't see and shouted, "Hold that line steady." I laughed once, a raw bark. "Ma'am, I'm fresh out of steady." "Borrow mine," she said, and took the base of the pole with both hands, her knuckles going white. For a beat, my shoulder could breathe. The skinny security man scrambled to his feet, hands flitting, looking for the jammer he'd dropped. The sheriff's boot found it first. "That yours?" he asked, mild as a Sunday, and the skinny man's mouth opened and closed like he'd never learned words that didn't end in "sir." Here's what happened. The volunteer captain called over his shoulder. "We're conducting an LZ drill, deputy." The sheriff nodded once. "Conduct it well." Behind his calm, the calculus was simple. A medical helicopter with eyes on a safe field, a private clubhouse belching risk, and a gaggle of residents recording like they were at a concert. He didn't need my scanner. He needed a landing. The siren leaned into its throat as Derek, now red-faced and sweating, cranked it like he was trying to roll back a storm. Karen wheeled, hair sticking to her lip gloss in a way that would have been funny if people weren't breathing smoke. "Turn that off!" she screamed at Derek. He kept cranking. He chose. I watched him choose and felt something shift in my chest that wasn't pain. Let me back up to the worst minute I ever lived, the night my wife didn't walk out of that building. We were understaffed and overextended. We made choices that were the least bad, not the best. I carried a child because he was small and visible. I went back for a voice I could hear. A ceiling changed its mind. After that, any siren sounded like a dare I didn't want to take. I built fences to keep the dare out. But watching Derek crank and Lena brace, hearing the old siren you could feel in your bones, I understood that not choosing was just another choice. "But here's what she didn't know," I said, and I meant Karen, who thought volume equaled power. "This siren doesn't ask for permission." The volunteer chief had spun up more trucks than I expected for a drill, and with them came a command presence that belonged to the people who run toward heat. He raised his hand toward the pilot and traced a slow, deliberate circle in the air. One more pattern, hold, read the ground. The helicopter banked, and in that bank the rotor wash pushed smoke across the club's roof like an eraser swipe, revealing a faint sparkle under the eave. "Back it down," the captain said into his radio. "No entry yet. Cool the exterior." A line opened up with a cough, and then a steady hiss that felt like someone had poured a glass of water into my chest. A muffled thump sounded inside the club, and a string of cheap fireworks chattered into life and died, having found nowhere to go but into their own cardboard. The smell thickened, sugary and wrong. Karen's composure, her whole brand, tore like wet paper. "This is slander!" she shouted into the megaphone at the volunteers in county vests, who hadn't said her name once. "We host family events here." "Then you should know where your exits are," Lena shot back, and if there was a little iron in her voice, she'd earned it. The sheriff's deputy lifted the drop jammer with 2 fingers, eyes flat. "Interesting toy," he said to nobody, and slipped it into an evidence bag like it had asked to be there. The helicopter settled, finally committing, skids kissing my field with a gentleness that made my throat thicken. The downwash flattened our world into a fast, loud painting, grass bowing, dust dancing, flag snapping like a sheet on a clothesline. Paramedics spilled out, focused, quiet, the kind of calm that only comes after you've been afraid enough times to learn where to put it. They sprinted to my tailgate. "He went gray, crushing chest pain, short of breath, diaphoretic," I yelled over the roar, my brain slipping back into triage like an old boot. 15 minutes ago, Lena added, compressing the timeline into something actionable. "O2 sat?" one asked. "Low," I said, even though I wasn't looking at a monitor. I could see it in his lips. "Copy," the medic said, and their hands moved like a good song's rhythm. The club coughed smoke, and then, as if it had been waiting to choose a side, a gout of sparks hissed behind the hedge where the generator had been purring. A volunteer barked, "Shut fuel!" and a wrench bit metal. The hiss died to a sputter. The door to the lower storage banged open, and the volunteer captain stepped back fast as a ground bloom roll thundered across the threshold and died in the damp grass. "Get me a thermal," he said, and a camera came to his hand like it had been listening for its name. He scanned the wall, the roofline, the door. "Heat and voids, not vented," he called. "Hold exterior." It wasn't heroics. It was competence. That's what real authority looks like. "Deputy," Karen said, voice pitched high enough to slice glass. "Arrest someone." "Who?" the deputy asked, genuinely curious, because there were too many candidates and the law likes clarity. She pointed at me, then at Lena, then at the volunteers, then remembered herself and smoothed her blouse like she could iron the moment flat. "They are trespassing and inciting," she declared. "We're rescuing," I said, not yelling, because whispering truth is louder than shrieking lies if you do it in the right silence. She stepped forward, putting herself between the paramedics and the helicopter path like a child trying to block a train. The deputy's hand went out, firm. "Ma'am," he said, "step back." She did finally, because her body knew what her ego didn't. Rotor blades don't negotiate. What I discovered next came not from any camera or document, but from a sound. Metal on tile, fast, panicked. The skinny man, realizing the club was more than a decoration, had sprinted inside toward the storage. "Don't!" the captain barked, but he ducked the tape, and the smoke took him like a bad idea takes a day. He stumbled back out coughing, eyes streaming, clutching a fistful of something foil-wrapped. He dropped it, and it burst into a snake of ash on the concrete. For the first time, his bravado cracked into something like a scared teenager who'd seen beyond his costume. It should have made me softer. It didn't. It made me sad. The paramedics loaded my neighbor, white-lipped, eyes slitted, a mask fogging with each shallow breath, onto a stretcher. I put my hand on his ankle. "You're going to fly, friend," I said, and lied because I didn't know. I let my hand stay there anyway, as if he could feel the siren through me. Lena squeezed my elbow and didn't let go when the ground tried to tilt. "We're not done," she said, reading the next chapter in my face. "Not until you put that flag down on purpose." I nodded, and my neck felt older than my boots. Then the pivot. A convoy I wasn't expecting swung onto the private drive. SWAT, black and matte, not roaring, just arriving like a fact. They moved with the bored precision of people who practice for boredom to be broken. "Call?" the team leader asked the deputy. "Third-party report of possible impersonation and interference," the deputy said, eyes flicking toward the chest cams and vests that said security but wanted to be more. The team leader took in the drop jammer, the volunteer setup, the siren, the smoke, the flag, the helicopter lifting with my neighbor inside. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. I didn't make the call. That's the point. Panic had. I'd bet a month's feed that the skinny man, or Karen, feeling control slip like a wet fish, had dialed something designed to get real authority on their side. Real authority showed up and didn't pick sides. It picked facts. "We got reports of gents in uniforms detaining residents," one SWAT officer said mildly, more paperwork than threat. "Let's see IDs." The thick one puffed up, then deflated when his wallet said what his vest didn't. The team split, two moving toward the club with the volunteers, two toward the Jeep and the tape, one pausing at my siren long enough to say to Derek, "Don't throw your back out, man," like an older brother ribbing a younger. Karen tried to pivot into gracious host and tripped. "Officer, we were simply maintaining order," she said, hand fluttering toward the smoke like a model gesturing at a new car. "We have very strict guidelines." "On fireworks storage?" the SWAT leader asked, deadpan, eyes sliding to the open door. "On impersonating officials?" the deputy added, eyes sliding to the vests. "On signal jamming?" a volunteer piped, with the kind of dry humor that keeps people sane in bad moments. Karen's mouth opened and closed, and for the first time she looked at me like I was a person, not a problem. I wasn't interested in her seeing me. I was interested in the man in the helicopter breathing air. Price, though. There's always a price. A bottle rocket shot wild from somewhere inside, ricocheted under the eave, and burrowed into the corner of my old equipment shed like a moth looking for a dishcloth. It coughed a smudge of flame. I saw it. Stupid small, stupid quick, and my body moved before my head picked a verb. I sprinted, shoulder-screaming protest, grabbed the hook, and ripped the corrugated panel away before the flame could find dry straw. Heat kissed my knuckles, burning hair and pride. The shed's roof caught a lick anyway, and by the time the volunteer swung a line to douse it, a corner went black and sagged like an old man's shoulder. That was my first shelter when we bought the place. That was where I taught myself to sleep again, while the house pretended to be whole. Watching it slump, was like watching a chapter tear itself out of my book. The helicopter lifted, rotors shouldering the weight of a life and dragging it back toward the hospital's clean light. I stood there with my hand on the flagpole, breath ragged, and watched it go until it was the size of a bird with purpose. Then I dropped the flag on purpose, like Lena had asked, because the job was done and holding it longer would have been about me. I walked to the siren and put my hand on Derek's shoulder. "Enough," I said. He let go of the crank like he'd been hoping I'd say it. Sweat-carved lines through the dust on his face. He started. "You will fix what you can fix," I said. "Start by opening every door they ask for and answering every question with the whole truth." He nodded, eyes wet in a way that wasn't about smoke. He'd chosen when it counted. He'd pay too. SWAT moved through the clubhouse like a black river finding low ground. They didn't kick down doors. They opened them with keys someone handed them. And that someone was Derek because I told him to, and because he wanted the siren out of his head as much as I did. They found stacks, boxes with labels like wedding sparklers that weighed like small engines, cords, a generator that had been flirting with a heat soak, and a closet of vests and badges that had ambitions. "You folks run a lot of committees," one of the officers said without malice, and I had to bite my lip to keep the bitter laugh from leaking out. Karen's power didn't leave her like a crown taken off. It leaked, drip by drip, every time someone ignored her pointing and did what was right instead of what was loud. She tried one last angle. "We were protecting children," she said to me quietly, like a human being asking another to join a story where she wasn't the villain. "You almost kept a father from seeing his again," I answered, not cruel, just aiming for the spot where truth sits. Her face softened in a way that said the argument she heard wasn't the one I was making. It was the one she'd been having with a mirror for years. She looked at the clubhouse as if it had betrayed her. Maybe it had. Maybe she'd believed the walls gave her authority, when it had really come from people indulging her because it was easier than fighting. The deputy walked back with the jammer in a bag and the vests in another. "We'll be taking statements," he said to the circle of cameras that were still up, still hungry, still not understanding that their eyes weren't the story. "And we'll be making some calls." He didn't look at me for permission, and I didn't need to give it. The volunteers began to coil hoses, water beating the grass like the field had started to cry and then thought better of it. The smell shifted from powdery sweet to clean wet, and in that change, something uncoiled in my chest that had been a fist for too long. Here's where the win isn't the neat kind. My shed was hurt and would need tearing down. My shoulder was a question I didn't want answered at an MRI. The neighbor would live or he wouldn't, and that was a coin in a sky I couldn't reach. But the thing I'd been avoiding, being the guy who steps forward instead of around, was back in my bones in a way that didn't feel like a dare so much as a homecoming. I walked into my hangar, past the tools and the oil stains and the dent in the wall. My wife left a backing the truck too sharp one spring and took her helmet down. I set it on the workbench, not like a shrine now, but like a piece of gear that might get used if called. You know what? I didn't need a press conference. I didn't need a courtroom. I had a siren and a flag and a stubbornness that, for once, had been pointed at the right wall. Karen didn't get perp walked. That would have been too easy for the story she tells herself. Instead, she had to stand in her own clubhouse while real professionals ran a drill that became the day she learned what responsibility costs. The residents who filmed got the video they wanted, but not the story she hoped it would tell. She left without speaking to me, trailing silence and the smell of burnt sugar. Maybe she'll keep her title. Maybe she won't. Titles are weather. That night, I walked the fence lines by flashlight, the beam cutting the grass into neat slices of green. The siren tower was a black spine against a star-pocked sky. The hangar hummed with the quiet of machines cooling. My shoulder ached like it had a heartbeat of its own. I sat on the step with a bag of frozen peas and listened to the coyotes organize their choir. Lena texted, "He made it to cath lab, stable. They'll call family." I let the breath out. I didn't know I'd been hoarding. "Good," I typed. "Thank you." She sent back a photo from earlier, my flag snapping red-white against the rotor wash, Karen's megaphone a mute oval, Derek cranking like penance. It looked like a painting of a lesson. The next morning, before the sun burned off the dew, a white pickup rolled up and my old chief stepped out, coffee in hand, hat pushed back so I could see his eyes. He looked at the scorched corner of my shed and the smudge on the club's eave and the flag folded on a sawhorse. "You did a thing," he said. "You did it your way, and you didn't make it about you." I shrugged with the wrong shoulder and winced. He saw it and let it go. "We're running a formal drill out here next month," he said, "with or without committee approval. Keep the field mowed." I smiled without deciding to. "Always," I said. He took a sip of coffee, then reached into his pocket and put something on my workbench, a brand new cheap brass whistle, "for when the siren's too much," he said, and left it there like a joke and a benediction. I walked to the club later with a small, heavy thing in my pocket. Karen was at a folding table alone, hair not helmet smooth, hands still. Papers lay in uneven stacks. The smell of cleanser and singe danced in the air like two people who didn't like each other but had to share a room. She looked up, and for a split second I saw the person under the posture, tired, skin sallow around the eyes, a crack in the certainty. "What now?" she asked, like she was too tired to be sharp. I put the small, heavy thing on the table. Brass keys, worn, Derek's ring. "You might want to keep track of who holds these," I said, "and what doors they open." She stared at the keys like they were a verdict written in a language she didn't speak. "You think you won," she said flatly. "I think a man got on a helicopter," I said. "I think my shed gave up a corner to buy him time. I think you love control because it feels like safety. I get that." She flinched at the last part more than at any of the rest. I let the silence sit and be heavy. Then I turned and walked out. On my way back across the gravel, Derek fell into step a pace behind me, like an understudy waiting for a cue. "If you're going to fire me, do it," he said, half laugh, half plea. "I don't fire," I said. "I assign?" He blinked. "You're going to make me fix the fence lines, aren't you?" "And cut the field," I said. "And show up when the volunteers train, and crank that siren when old folks get lost in the mesquite and need to hear where home is." He nodded, relief cutting through the smoke that still hung over his shoulders. "I can do that," he said. "Good," I said. "Start by telling Karen you handed over the keys because I asked you to. Use my name. If she needs to be mad, she can be mad at me." He looked at me like I'd handed him 5 pounds he could carry instead of 50 he couldn't. "Thanks," he said, and meant it. That evening, just before dark, I walked to the siren tower with a rag and a wrench. The metal was warm from the day. The windsock hung limp, then lifted just an inch like it was tasting the idea of a breeze. I climbed the ladder one rung at a time, shoulder talking but not shouting, and greased the fittings that had screamed for help the day before. Down below, the field lay smooth and ordinary, the way a bed looks after you wash sheets. Ready for bodies? Yes, but not in a bad way. I looped the rescue flag over my arm and felt its weight. Cloth and story. When I came down, Lena was leaning on my fence, elbows tucked, like the day had told her exactly where to find me. "You gonna be okay?" she asked, and didn't sugar it. "No," I said, honest. "I'm going to be different." She smiled crooked. "That can be okay," she said. "Sometimes it's better." Before she left, she pointed at the siren. "Keep it ready," she said. "Not for them, for us." "Always," I said again, because sometimes the right word is simple. The coyotes tuned up as the sun slid behind the hills, and for once the sound didn't make the place feel lonelier. The whistle on my bench winked in the last light. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need it. The night settled around the ranch like a blanket somebody finally shook out right. And for the first time in a long time, the quiet didn't feel like a dare. It felt like a choice I'd earned. Drop a comment if you've ever stood your ground with nothing but a flag and a stubborn heart. Let me know if you'd have done it different. Smash that. Like if you've ever learned the hard way that authority isn't a costume, it's a job.